Hey guys, first Regardsman here, and I'll be talking about the Bulwark class in Space Marine 2, and everything you need to know about his strengths, weaknesses, and gameplay loops, so by the end of this video, you'll have a better understanding of the class, whether you're a brand new player or a veteran in the game. Bulwarks, otherwise known as Blade Guards, form the melee backbone of a Primara squad alongside the Assault, and they are very similar to Knights of Terran Legend, well known for their use of power swords and similar types of weaponry. And in Space Marine 2, the Bulwark functions as the anchor for your entire team. As the name would imply, you are the sturdiest class in the game, boasting the highest health total possible in Space Marine 2, with staggering amounts of damage and damage reduction. The Bulwark is actually so effective that it is widely considered to be one of, if not the best class in the entire game through multiple patches. It's also one of the best classes for new and veteran players, since its high health total makes it a great option for beginners to punch up into higher difficulties, while also still having more advanced mechanics like animation canceling and shield bashing, giving you something to work towards long term. Now in this guide, I'll primarily be going over Bulwark specific mechanics, but if you want more guides for stuff like health, armor, and difficulty levels, you can find those in the video description. The greatest strength of the Bulwark class is his access to insane amounts of both armor regeneration and health damage reduction, on top of his ability to grant both of these to your entire team, while not really sacrificing any of his damage to achieve his survivability, as the Bulwark is still capable of putting out top tier damage since he still has some of the most powerful melee perks in the game. The Bulwark starting perk gives him a 30% increased starting HP, which baseline makes this class the tankiest option in the game. This is the crux of making his damage reduction perks like Conviction that much more effective as well, since Space Marine 2 already has a ramping damage reduction below 25% health. When you combine this with your base HP being higher and add in any damage reduction on top, you kind of just become absurdly tanky on this class, as your effective HP becomes that much higher and allows you to survive some of the most brutal stun locks the game has to offer. I do have a full guide on health and armor as well if you're curious to hear more about the ramping damage reduction available for all classes, but I really would suggest taking at least one of Bulwark's flat health damage reduction perks like Conviction or Steel Within, because these perks stack to incredibly high damage reduction values that make your life significantly easier on this class. The next thing we'll be covering here about the Bulwark is his base class ability, the Chapter Banner. This is one of the strongest options for defense and offense in the game currently. Upon placing your banner, it will slowly regenerate armor for both you and your teammates. This may not seem like much initially, but in Space Marine 2, armor will stop all incoming melee damage regardless of how much you have remaining, so even if the banner is only giving you and your teammates a sliver of armor back, you're practically immortal against enemy melee attacks. Your Chapter Banner can also deal damage to enemies with perks like Purity of Purpose, so that grants the banner a damage over time effect similar to a shock grenade. This makes it an amazing tool for both defense and offense, since it really just lets you and your teammates set yourselves up to easily use your full tool sets to either delete bosses or just have an easier time with horde management. The base duration of your Chapter Banner is 20 seconds, which is already pretty long, but this can be further increased with perks like Glorious Shield, and the only real downside of the Chapter Banner is that it has an exceptionally long cooldown of 125 seconds, so making it the longest recharge time of any class ability in the game. But luckily for the Bulwark, you can mitigate this with one of his prestige perks that grants him cooldown reduction for every blocked range attack. This brings us to the next portion of the Bulwark class, and arguably his most important function, which is his war gear, the Storm Shield. On the Bulwark class, whenever you hold your parry button, you will raise your shield, which is capable of blocking all standard ranged and melee attacks from the front. This can even stop Tyranid sniper shots and zone throw balls from dealing damage to you, but heavier hits like these will stagger you despite taking no damage unless you have a no knockback perk effect currently active. Your shield will also automatically raise while you're sprinting, so it can also be used to block enemy range fire on the advance. Another unique mechanic of the Storm Shield is your shield bash and rush attack. To perform a shield bash, all you have to do is press a melee attack when you are actively blocking. This will perform a forward facing bash dealing damage to enemies, and to perform a shield rush attack, you simply hold down your melee button instead while you are blocking, and you'll begin to charge up your shield rush attack, and upon releasing your melee button, you will rush forward to the nearest enemy, dealing damage depending on your total charge time. This makes you not only incredibly fast, but it can also stagger any enemy you hit, including enraged enemies that are normally immune to stagger mechanics, on top of blocking every range attack like a normal block during your charge up and forward rush attack. Though be careful, because the auto-targeting of this ability will force you to the nearest enemy, which can also be something like a Spore Mine that will rob you of your HP or get you outright killed. And this brings us to the most powerful tool of the Storm Shield, which is your animation canceling. Whenever you use your shield to block, you will immediately cancel any action you are currently performing, which allows you to respond to things in melee that other classes simply cannot. This is a huge portion of what makes the Bulwark so damn powerful and what gives it a bit of a learning curve for a lot of players, as properly utilizing your animation animation canceling is vital to bringing out this class's full potential. Now, to perform this animation cancel, you need to make sure to actually hold your block input for a very short period of time, as only lightly tapping the button will result in a parry instead. After this, you can let go of your shield button to dodge, attack, or really do whatever it is you need to do in a given situation. This is the hardest part of the Bulwark class to learn, so if you're struggling with it initially, just give it some practice and time. This also brings me to something else that is very important to know on the Bulwark class, which is your parry timing. A ton of players have a significantly harder time parrying with this class than other ones, as currently your block and parry keys are hard linked by the game, which means a lot of the time a new Bulwark player will try to parry and get a block instead, or vice versa. To help mitigate this issue, when you intend to use your shield for a block, you need to make sure to briefly hold the parry button rather than tap it, as this will help avoid accidentally parrying. And the biggest tip for making sure you actually use a parry on this class instead of blocking is to double tap your parry button, as this will basically guarantee that you will achieve a parry input instead of a block input. This was actually the biggest thing that improved in my gameplay on Bulwark at launch, as one of the most confusing aspects of this class for a lot of players, but if you do this, the parry timing on this class is significantly easier. You can also use this tip on other classes as well. It really is the easiest way to guarantee a parry in Space Marine 2 in my experience. As for the weapon selection on the Bulwark class, you have access to pretty much every melee weapon in the game, with the major standouts being the Power Fist and Power Axe. The Power Fist being the best melee weapon in game currently, and heavily benefiting from the Bulwark's Overcharged Prestige perk and animation canceling that dramatically increases its damage, alongside allowing you to escape from charge attack animation locks. Something I want to bring up when it comes to the Bulwark's weapon selection though is the Thunderhammer. If you do wind up taking a Thunderhammer, you will lose out on your shield war gear entirely with no replacement, which does kind of just make it the de facto worst weapon on the Bulwark currently, as the Storm Shield is an enormous part of what makes this class so incredibly strong for all the reasons I previously mentioned. That being said, you can still definitely use the Thunderhammer. It will perform fairly well, it just doesn't have the same performance as his strongest options. Your secondary weapon selection is also fairly strong. You have access to the Plasma Pistol and Heavy Bolt Pistol, which is really all you need for most situations on any class, be it Chaos or Tyranids. The major downside of the Bulwark class, just like the Assault, is a lack of a primary weapon. This can lead to ammo issues, and points where getting back your contested health at range can prove a bit more difficult. And while by no means bad at AoE horde clear, he lacks the same burst damage as the Assault class when it comes to massive enemy clumps, and relies more on damage over time effects like Purity of Purpose or Mercy countermeasures to deal area damage on most builds. One other thing to keep in mind while you are playing the Bulwark is that your shield will increase your hitbox while you are blocking, which usually doesn't matter that much, but can get you burned alive behind a pillar while fighting the Helldrake or other similar scenarios. When it comes to actually playing the Bulwark class, your job is that of a frontliner, but that's not to say that you're supposed to intentionally tank damage. Your survivability, thanks to your damage reduction, is really there to enable you to revive teammates or stay alive when they're all dead. Thanks to your animation cancel, the Bulwark can be played highly aggressively and does not lack for damage at all. One of his strongest perks is Intimidating Aura, which will deal enormous damage every time you parry an enemy, and thanks to this perk effect, you are pretty much able to deal damage the entirety of your gameplay combat loop, whether you are on the defensive or offensive. The reality of the Bulwark is that for most combat situations, he really doesn't have any significant downside, and the most difficult enemies for him to deal with are the Zoanthropes plus Neurothropes, because he can't simply beat them to death like everything else in melee. This is why I usually prefer taking his Heavy Bolt Pistol option when using him versus Tyranids, since it makes these enemies significantly easier, and the Plasma Pistol performs very well thanks to its stagger against Chaos. The biggest thing you have to manage when playing this class is your banner cooldown. Like I mentioned before, the chapter banner has an exceptionally long cooldown that only further increases if you take perks like Invigorating Icon for team healing, and a bad placement during a boss fight or massive enemy wave can be the difference between an easy victory or your entire team eating dirt. But if you dedicate the time to Bulwark, there really isn't much that can kill you in most of the game's content, and your teammates will thank you since you'll be able to bail them out of some of the hardest situations the game has to offer. But those are the basic mechanics of the Bulwark class explained. If you want specific build guides for this class, I have a ton on this channel as well that I update between patches regularly, but for now, we're going to be going through the Bulwark's perk tree breakdown to give a bit of an idea of what perks you should take and which ones you should avoid. Now, the Bulwark has a ton of amazing perks in his tree, and we'll be going through all of those today, starting off with the perk Conviction. When your armor is fully depleted, you will take 25% less health damage for 10 seconds. I talked about this one a bit in the original guide, but when you combine this perk with your starting perk with an HP increase of 30%, you are ridiculously tanky. It is also one of the best perks in general for damage reduction, and it's also the first perk you will get on the Bulwark in general, so most players will get the full benefit out of this one at some point in their leveling experience. Next perk here is Intimidating Aura. A perfect time parry deals AoE damage in a 5-meter radius, so the cooldown is 5 seconds. Now, this will work on a perfect block, not just a perfect parry, and it's one of the best perks in the entire game. The main reason this is so strong is because it's just free damage for like your basic gameplay loop. Every single class in Space Marine 2 has to parry or perfect block at some point in time, and getting free damage off of that is kind of ridiculous because this basically puts enemies into one-shot combo range where you will perfect parry, get a gunstrike the Majoris, and just get an execute range for them. So really, really powerful option. Definitely pick this up on like 99% of meta builds. Next perk here is Forward Momentum. After a Shield Bash, Shield Rush, or Thunderhammer Pommel Smash, melee damage increases by 30% for 10 seconds. This is definitely the weakest perk in this column here, mainly because the damage calculation is not that good. It may say 30%, but this is a 30% additive bonus versus like the multiplicative increase of an overcharge perk, so it's not like god awful, it's just not as strong as it sounds initially. Still pretty good though, and being able to trigger free damage off of your basic gameplay loop on this class is quite strong. Next perk here is Armor of Contempt. When you block a ranged attack, enemies within a 10-meter radius take the damage instead. Guys, this perk sucks. This might be like the most overrated perk in Space Marine 2 for the Bulwark class. The damage here is pitiful. The better you get with Bulwark, the worse this perk actually gets because you're usually not sitting there just holding down your block button anyways, and you have to be within a 10-meter radius, and a lot of the time you'll be blocking enemies from further away than that, and the damage here is just not very strong like I mentioned before. Next perk here is Shock and Awe. Enemies in the shock area take 25% more damage. This perk is okay. You really only take this with things like the Heroic Thunderhammer or emergency countermeasure builds. It's not awful by any means. It does have a niche use. It's just outside of those scenarios, you really don't ever take this. Next perk here is Scramble Targeting. If you're surrounded by 5 or more enemies, you take 25% less damage from range attacks. This is by far the best perk in this column here because a 25% range damage reduction for being surrounded by 5 or more enemies, that happens all the time in Space Marine 2. Also, the 25% range damage reduction here will affect your armor, and the Bulwark has a ton of armor restoration in this game off its chapter banner, focus restoration that we'll get into in a second, and stuff like armor reinforcement. Next perk here is Defensive Advantage. A perfect time parry or block creates a shock area for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 30 seconds. This perk could be pretty good with a Shock and Awe build and like emergency countermeasures. Unfortunately, a 30-second cooldown is just way too long for a 5-second shock area effect. Even if you do play with the Heroic Thunderhammer, I would skip over this entirely. It's just not that strong of an effect at all, and a 30-second cooldown is just way, way too long. Next perk here is Steel Within. When your health's less than 50%, you take 30% less health damage. This is an incredible perk, by far the best in this column in my opinion, though armor reinforcement is pretty damn close. The main reason this is so strong is that when you drop below 25% HP, like I mentioned before, you will get a ramping damage reduction for any class in the game. This will stack on top of that, on top of your 30% starting HP here, which makes you ridiculously tanky. And this also gives you the full opportunity to take the Intimidating Aura perk on top of having a health damage reduction, which is like the best combo in the game currently. Next perk here is Armor Reinforcement. Non-finisher gun strikes restore 1 armor segment. This is still a top tier option. If you stack this with Intimidating Aura against Tyranids, you will mop like 99% of hordes. It is a very powerful tool. This is a top tier perk effect on both the Bulwark and Assault class, and armor restoration is very potent in this game. Steel Within is just a little bit better in my opinion, because you can also get armor regeneration from the next perk here, which is Focus Restoration. Every 30 seconds, all team members automatically restore 1 armor segment. This is a deceptively powerful perk in Space Marine 2. Being able to give armor restoration to squishier classes like Tactical is incredible in this game. Like I mentioned before, armor will stop all incoming melee damage no matter what, which is really strong for classes like Tactical that will otherwise get one-shot at times. Even classes like Tech Marine, where despite having their own armor regen, they do have a very low HP pool, so Bulwark does make up for that partially with Focus Restoration, and it really is a top tier perk effect. Next perk here is Advanced Conditioning. Contested health fades 50% more slowly for all team members. This is a really good perk for new players. I actually like this one a lot. I would suggest it for like a brand new starting player in general, mainly because managing your contested health in this game is one of the hardest things to do when you are starting out, and really even for veterans it's pretty good because contested health recovery is not that quick in this game, or I should say the delay is not very slow at all, which means that this perk makes up for that dramatically, and being able to get your contested health back more easily, that's a very potent effect in every single difficulty and game mode. Next perk here is Effective Formation. All team members take 20% less health damage from Extremis and Terminus level enemies. This is by far the weakest in this column, in my opinion. It's actually pretty strong on its own, but compared to Advanced Conditioning and Focus Restoration especially, I do think it kind of falls behind. I mean, a 20% health damage reduction from Extremis and Terminus, that is pretty nice. This also affects the on-mission bosses like the Hive Tyrant, Vortex Beast, or the Trigon, so it's pretty good for that as well. But for the most part, I would just take these two instead. But if you want that extra damage reduction for like a full damage reduction build, you could definitely pick that up. Next perk here is Purity of Purpose. The banner will deal damage over time to enemies within its area of effect. This is a god tier perk on the Bulwark class. With this, your banner is not only an amazing defensive tool, but also an incredible offensive tool. You will wipe out Minoris, you will deal significant damage to Majoris, Extremis, and even bosses. And if you put this down on a boss spawn, you are not only wiping out that reinforcement horde, you are also just dealing the free damage to the Terminus on top of being able to put out your own damage, because the chapter banner already just makes it easier in general for you to fight a boss like in its face anyways. Next perk here is Rapid Regeneration. The banner restores armor 300% faster, but its duration is reduced to 10 seconds. You know, this perk really just needs a rework in my opinion. You shouldn't have like a 10-second duration. It cuts the duration of your banner in half, which is awful, and a 300% faster armor restoration is nice for like range attacks. But against melee, it doesn't matter at all, because like we mentioned in the main guide, even a sliver of armor will stop all melee damage, so you really do not need this perk at all. I would never pick this up. Next perk here I would also never pick up, which is Focus Strength. Shield Bash knocks enemies back and makes them lose control for a longer period of time. I mean, you're not really using your Shield Bash to knock enemies around anyways, and you're giving up not only, you know, the perk up here, Rapid Regeneration even, which is a little bit better in my opinion than this one is, but you're also giving up the god tier perk, which is Purity of Purpose. So I would generally stick with this one for, you know, a meta build, but obviously you can play whatever you want. Next perk here is Concussive Force. Shield Bash, it deals 200% more damage. Shield Rush deals 100% more damage. Thunder Hammer Pommel Smash deals 100% more damage, and it deals an AoE damage within a 7-meter radius. The cooldown is 5 seconds. Yeah, that one's kind of like word salad here, but the big thing is that Shield Bash does 200% more damage, Shield Rush does 100% more damage, and this turns your Shield Bash into like one of the highest DPS things in the entire game, because on the Bulwark class, like I mentioned the animation cancel in the original guide, you can animation cancel your active Shield Bash into another Shield Bash over and over by blocking, which is a very powerful effect, and that allows you to put out this 200% damage increase on top of whatever else you have very quickly. So one of the best perks for DPS, maybe not the easiest to use though. And for the Thunder Hammer option here, I would usually just skip this on the Thunder Hammer, because you're not using the Pommel Smash that much on a Bulwark anyways, unless you build like full forward momentum and Merciless Resolve, which we'll get into later. Next perk here is Glory Shield. All team members in the banner's area of effect take 20% less damage, and the banner lasts 20% longer. I love this perk. Glorious Shield feels really good to use, because unlike the Invigorating Icon perk down here, you don't have a slower recharge on your banner, which means you're getting more banners, and those banners also last longer. It also has great synergy with perk effects like Purity of Purpose, because your banner is lasting longer, and stuff like Inspiration for a 20% damage buff for you and your teammates in the banner, which makes it pretty fun for like a team buff build. And that 20% damage reduction is very substantial, even though it is a bit worse than the next perk here, which is of course Invigorating Icon. When the banner is activated, all team members regain maximum contested health, but it recharges 50% slower. This perk just prints HP for your entire team. When you put the banner down, you will get all of your CHP back. All you have to do after that is just execute an enemy, or just shoot them or damage them at all, and you will recover lost HP. Healing mechanics in Space Marine 2 are very strong, because they kind of break the pickup economy of the game, and this is one of the best there is. And even though you have a 50% slower recharge rate, this perk is still by far the best in this column, at least when it comes to survivability, because printing HP, that is a ridiculously strong effect. Next perk here is Rejuvenating Effect. When the banner is activated, it revives incapacitated squad members in the area of effect. This perk is nice to have if you're just trying to like save your teammates who are struggling to be gotten up. Sometimes there are like ridiculous hordes in this game where you just need to put down a banner and res your teammates. I do like this in siege mode for that reason sometimes, because if a Lictor's interrupting you, a Ravener, or like a melee Terminator, sometimes this is the only option. But I do also prefer the other one down here, which is Merciless Resolve. After a Shield Bash, Shield Rush, or Thunder Hammer Pommel Smash, melee damage increases by 15%, you don't lose control of heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. On most builds, if you are not taking Armored Advance, this is the main form of no knockback on this class. No knockback is a very potent effect in Space Marine 2 because basically what it does is any attack that would stagger you will do nothing instead. Any attack that would knock you over will only stagger you, so it's really good to prevent stun locks. And on top of that, you get a 15% melee damage increase on this perk, and all you have to do to trigger this is just Shield Bash the air or Shield Rush the air. It doesn't matter if you actually hit an enemy or not. And just keep in mind, if you want to reapply the effect, you do have to wait for that initial 10-second duration to run out, otherwise you can't do so just keep that in mind. Next perk here is Inspiration. All team members in the Banner's air effect deal 20% more damage. A 20% damage buff here is okay. This is not like the best perk effect ever because your chapter banner does have a very long cooldown. You know, while it's up, it is nice, but I do prefer the other two perk options here, or really just this one, because it's up pretty much 24/7. If you want to take this for like a full banner support build, you definitely can. It's a pretty fun perk option. Next perk here is Emergency Countermeasure. When your armor is fully depleted, a reserve shock grenade automatically detonates at your position. The cooldown is 45 seconds. Now, having an automatic squid inking grenade is pretty nice. You know, you'll just put down that shock nade, you'll wipe out all the Minoris around you, and usually a lot of people have trouble with Minoris in this game anyway, so this is a great perk for new players. That being said, the other options below here are a bit better, but you know, shock nades are a very strong effect, and if you are going for a full shock nade build, this is definitely a good option for that, on top of perks like Shock and Awe we talked about previously. Next perk here is Defensive Mastery. A per time parry or block instantly incapacitates a Majoris or Extremis level enemy. The cooldown is 90 seconds. This is the best perk in this entire column, in my opinion. Despite having a 90-second cooldown, being able to one-shot an enraged enemy on a parry or an Extremis is incredibly potent in Space Marine 2. Extremis enemies during a boss spawn usually only give you like 1 or 2, and being able to instantaneously eliminate a melee Terminator, a Ravener, or like a Lictor and stuff like that, that'll make your entire boss fight go significantly easier. And even in siege mode, where the enemies get a ramping damage reduction, and or you have a ramping damage loss, you have a 90-second cooldown on this to one-shot enemies that might take multiple Melt-A-Bombs at times, so a really powerful option there as well. And also you just kind of make up for your loss of no knockback by taking this perk instead. The final perk here is Armored Advance. If you have armor remaining, you do not lose 12 heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked. For the same reasons this perk is strong, no knockback while you have armor remaining is also very powerful. You will usually have armor on this class anyways, because like we mentioned before, you got a chapter banner, you got armor reinforcement, you got focus restoration. This is by far the best perk for new players because it's pretty much automated. Like, you will always have a loop of armor in this game anyways, so having a no knockback effect active pretty much all the time is very easy to do with this option. And that's pretty much everything there is for the main Bulwark perk tree here. Now, for the Prestige perk tree on the Bulwark class, the Bulwark is some of the best Prestige perk options in the entire game, in my opinion, starting off with the perk Auxiliary Reload. Melee kills of Extremis or higher enemies restore secondary weapons ammo by 1 magazine. This is one of the only secondary weapon ammo restore options in the entire game outside of perks like Adamant Restoration on the Inferno pistol. I would mainly pick this up on a plasma gun because plasma will have a percentage restore because the plasma pistol doesn't actually have a magazine capacity of any kind on its own. But if you're using something like a heavy bolt pistol, you will only get back the base magazine capacity, so just keep that in mind. I do think the restoration here is better on plasma, and obviously this perk will scale up into difficulties like Siege Mode where there are more Extremis, or hard strats and absolute operations. Next perk here is Resilience. Medicae Sims restore 40% more health. I do think this perk is pretty underrated, maybe not as strong as it is on Tactical because Bulwark does have other healing options like Invigorating Icon, but if I am skipping over this perk for like Glory Shield or something, having a better stim economy does help out quite a bit, and healing above half HP off a single stim, it feels pretty good in Space Marine 2, so if you want to pick this up, you definitely can. Next perk here is Overcharge. Held in charge attack damage increases by 20%. This is one of the best melee attack perks in the entire game. It is a 20% multiplicative melee damage increase to the heaviest hitting attacks in Space Marine 2. This will affect your power backstep on a power axe, your bash on a chainsword or stomp, your power rake on the power sword. Really powerful perk. I pretty much picked this up on any build because there really is not a single melee weapon in Space Marine 2 that will not benefit from Overcharge tremendously, so definitely grab this one. Next perk here is Powerful Shot. Range damage increases by 20%. A 20% range damage increase is a pretty boring perk effect, but it's also a very strong perk effect, so if you want to incorporate this one as well, you really can't go wrong with like a flat damage increase like this. And the next perk here is God Tier with Masterful Defense. Ability charge restored by 1% for every blocked range attack. This perk generates so much value for you on this class. You will pretty much get an entire banner back off of a minigun Terminator shooting into your shield with this. But even if you only get back like 10% CDR from this perk, that is still tremendously valuable for you because CDR effects are usually some of the strongest in any horde shooter, especially if your chapter banner is as powerful as it is in this game, because an ability like this will just generate value on its own with stuff like Purity of Purpose, and getting it back even like 20% faster. That is just such a strong effect that you really should pretty much always pick this up on a shield build. Now I will mention this will not work at all if you're taking the Thunder Hammer, so if you're not using a shield option, skip over it, but if you are, pretty much always take it. Now the next perk here is Standard Bearer. When Chapter Banner activates, you become invulnerable to damage for 2 seconds. This perk is actually pretty good in my opinion, especially if you're using like a Thunder Hammer or something, because the 2 seconds of invulnerability will give you the opportunity to use an Aftershock and stuff like that, mainly because invulnerability in Space Marine 2 functions as the ultimate form of no knockback. Any attack in this game will do 0 damage to you on top of not staggering you at all, so really good for that, and I do like picking it up on some of the Thunder Hammer builds for that reason. The final perk here is Emboldened Stand. When the chapter banner is active, all team members do not lose 12 heavy hits and cannot be knocked back within the zone. I don't think this perk is very good at all, mainly because the chapter banner really makes you kind of immortal already half the time, because any amount of armor remaining in Space Marine 2, like I mentioned before, will reduce all incoming melee damage to 0 even from bosses. So if you're surrounded by melee guys and you're just getting like a tiny drip feed of armor back from your banner, this perk is really not that necessary, and most classes already have a no knockback effect on top of the fact that the chapter banner is just not up long enough or often enough for this to really come into play that often, so I would just kind of skip over this one for better options. I think the current best setup is like Overcharge, Powerful Shot, Masterful Defense, and then a mix of Resilience and Auxiliary Reload. And if you're using something like a Thunder Hammer, I'd probably take like Resilience, Overcharge, Powerful Shot, and Standard Bearer. And that's pretty much all there is for this tree here. And that is pretty much everything there is for the Bulwark class in Space Marine 2. This class is a very popular choice because he is the quintessential hold the line support archetype in this game, and that is among the most entertaining playstyles for a lot of players in any horde shooter, so it's not a surprise the Bulwark is a Space Marine 2 fan favorite. But hopefully this guide helped you better understand the class, and that is all I have to say in this one. If you like content like this, subscribe for more. If you want to catch me live to ask me questions about the game, or just come hang out, you can find me here on YouTube or on Twitch with a link in the video description alongside a link to my community Discord. As always guys, thank you for watching, take it easy, bye.